Now, blackouts or load shedding has been in effect for 15 years now, and there's no end in sight to the problems that plague Eskom. Let's discuss the ongoing power crisis with Energy Analyst Sampson Mamphweli. Prof, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining me. So, I must say, when I saw that we're going to have blackouts, load shedding over the weekend, there was no surprise there. But I must say I was surprised by the stage 4 over the weekend, where, conventional wisdom tells you that the demand is slightly lower, in that those factories and firms and companies that don't run 24/7, powered down and don't need to be using as much energy as possible. But at this stage, does this suggest to you that the problems are, worse than we had grasped, that we're now getting stage 4 even over the weekend when demand is said to be lower?
Good evening, Tlasizwe and the viewers. Yes, the problem is quite severe. I was looking at the Eskom statement, and we've lost about 16,000 megawatts, and they've got about 3,800 megawatts. That's also out for maintenance. So that takes us very close to 20,000 megawatts that has been lost. The other issue is the fact that they can't run their open cycle gas turbines at the moment, because they are afraid that they may run out of diesel. They are only going to get diesel by Monday. Which means then that they need to revert to load shedding so that the system does not collapse. So the problem is quite big. And if you look at the impact of load shedding, for each stage of load shedding, we lose about 500 million in the economy. And adding to the current challenges that Eskom has is the higher demand because of the winter period. So many people have got their heaters on, they are doing space heating, as well as the water heating. The water heating aspect also takes a lot of energy during winter. So if you look at the impact, like I was saying, 500 million if it's during the week of the economy, and we lose about 3% of the GDP over a year. That goes along with job losses. If you look at last year, only more than 400,000 jobs were lost. So the question for me is, do we have a plan in terms of the short-term plans? We have long-term plans that government is busy implementing, and we appreciate those. But I was looking at what can be done immediately to arrest the situation. For us to get up to 16,000 megawatts, or even half of the 16,000 megawatts, we could start looking at the water heating aspect and start with the rollout of things such as solar water heaters. We need to install up to 1 million solar water heaters and up to 1 million heat pumps, up to 1 million gas water heaters, as well as coming up with geyser control systems where we can control our geysers so that they are only heating up the water during the off-peak period between 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. That's the peak period during the week, and later in the evening we make sure that we don't use a lot of electricity during that peak period. That will give Eskom some space for breathing. The interventions that I've mentioned, we need to invest about 50 billion rands in some kind of rebate system where people can be allowed to install these systems and then claim back from Eskom or from government, as opposed to us waiting for government to go through some tenders where the process may even be tainted, and we may not be able to roll out the various systems in time.
Yeah. So just looking at those numbers, right, and also you rightly mentioned the Eskom statement, and basically talking about how demand has actually been higher than what they had anticipated over this really cold weekend in many parts of the country. And also you rightly point out the lack of a balance and equivalence between what Eskom has taken out for maintenance being about 3,800 megawatts being out on planned maintenance, while 16,050 megawatts of capacity is due to breakdowns. Looking at that mix, the demand being higher than expected, and these outages that we have in as far as the Eskom plant is concerned, how worried are you that stage 4 could turn out to be, a precursor to something even further, that we could go to even stage 6? I've heard people talking about stage 8 even.
Yes, I'm very extremely worried about this, and there is a possibility of a higher stage load shedding. If you look at the Eskom statement talking about diesel, the ship docking on Monday and offloading up until Tuesday, that's a little bit of a worry for me. We could see this stage 5 load shedding being announced anytime soon. The biggest problem that we have is the fact that we have a power system that breaks down, especially on the coal power station side. The breakdowns are very much unpredictable at the moment. So we're sitting with about 16,000 megawatts that's not available due to breakdowns. And these breakdowns could be anything as small as trips in generator trips, and anything as big as boiler tube problems in those old power stations. So depending on what happens in the power stations, in the coal fleet, anything is possible, and Eskom always implement this load shedding as a last resort, like they always indicate, but just to protect the power system so that we don't have a total breakdown of the system. I cannot rule out the possibility of stage 8 load shedding, and that takes me back to the study that was done by the CSIR. I think it was sometime in 2019, where they actually warned us about stage 8 load shedding by 2022. And looking at how things have been so far, one is very much worried that we could be facing that reality that the CSIR has actually cautioned us about. That's why I'm looking now at what is it that government and Eskom can do in the interim to ease the pressure on the grid.
Yeah, and I like the suggestions you make there, Prof. Mamphweli, and I suppose it adds to what Eskom calls risk, what government calls the risk mitigation, that long acronym, Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, that includes the Kapowership, and the sooner those come into action, the sooner we can mitigate some of these risks. I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on eNCA. That's Professor Sampson Mamphweli, who is an energy analyst. And yeah, I mean, Eskom says the demand this weekend is actually 1,200 megawatts higher than what they had anticipated. They don't really have the option of using more diesel to run their open cycle gas turbines to keep, things running, because diesel is a bit of a challenge, and they're expecting the ship to dock on Monday and delivery to be done by Tuesday, and only then can you even talk about the very expensive diesel mitigating load shedding between you and I over the next few days. So